Hey, horror fans, hope you're all doing well. Me and Rachel McDonald back with you for another week, and on this video, we're going to do a special review of a Shudder release, and the movie is called The Last Thing Mary Saw. This might be something we'll do, once in a while, where we might catch up on a Shudder film or a recent streaming film, because I tend to get some interesting stuff on Shudder and stuff that at the very least is worth watching. So this is a period piece set in New York in 1843. So Rachel, do you want to give a little bit of a setup and some of your thoughts?
So as Keith said, this is a period horror. So it kind of centers around these two girls. So we open with our titular character Mary having kind of a trial, so to speak, to find out exactly what went down surrounding the mysterious death of her grandmother. And through flashbacks, we see that she had a relationship with another young girl which obviously was not approved of because being puritanical times, obviously homosexuality is very much viewed as a sin, and it's kind of a slow burn drama showing the events unfolding towards the grandmother's death, and it's kind of a look into like fear and bigotry surrounding, these old religious ideas of, puritanical ideas of homosexuality and things like that. So I have to admit, I was not overly impressed with this. I usually like a slow burn. I very much like a slow burn drama, but I do feel that this one, I don't know. It felt to me like it could never really find its feet. Like it just kind of was stumbling around a little bit. There were some scenes that I found a bit confusing. And I have to say, as far as lesbians going in puritanical times being persecuted because of their homosexuality, I think Fear Street did it better. I really felt like I was just watching like a lesser version of that. I think that there were some interesting choices made. Like, for example, a lot of the lighting used is obviously natural lighting. They use a lot of shadows and a lot of atmosphere. The two girls who played the two leads, Isabel Fuhrman is one of them. I quite like her. Orphan, The Hunger Games. So she's an actress I like a lot. I think she actually did a better job than the Mary character. And we do get a very disturbing look into the sorts of punishments that they used to use back then. We see them do things like having to kneel on rice, which just seems like a horrible, horrible thing. They try to get rid of the servant girl. They try to send her away. There's lots of Bible chanting. But for me, it was very slow and very plodding. And I found myself tuning out a lot during the film because it just wasn't gripping me, which is a pity because I think the premise was quite good, but it just felt like maybe they didn't quite know what they wanted to do. At least that's the feeling I got. What was your impression of the movie?
I agree. I'm very similar. This didn't really do much for me. I thought the characters in it were kind of bland, really. There wasn't a great deal of atmosphere. Maybe one or two scenes were quite effective, but overall, I didn't think there was a lot of atmosphere or style to it. And you're probably right about it not really quite knowing what it wanted to be or wanted to do, because I sort of feel for this sort of thing, you need to go one of two ways. I think you either have to go on and make it a full-blown sort of satire or fast type thing where you're kind of sending up how ridiculous this sort of form of extreme religion is, and sort of getting under its skin that way and showing it up for what it is. Or you just need to make it a more straight, psychological style horror with a bit more of an atmosphere, and also just treat the subject with a bit more depth, a bit more serious. So it didn't really do either of those two things. It was just this film which you could sort of watch, but I agree with you, it was quite plodding in places, and I sort of felt for the cast because overall it was a solid cast. I think I like some more than others. I thought the two girls were pretty solid, but they weren't given much to do. I actually thought Rory Culkin was good in his appearance. I think he managed to be quite unsettling and
Yes.
quite an effective sort of oddball. Some people know him from the fourth Scream film, of course, quite sort of weirdo oddballs. So he's quite good in the scene where he appears as like the intruder. But some of the other cast I didn't think were that good. I thought they were a bit wooden, some of them, and some of the dialogue was pretty bad, and there
Yeah.
was quite a lot of just mumbling and plot exposition. Some slightly wonky accents. I think some of them were like inconsistent. Like it would be one thing if they were all roughly sounding like they were from the same place, but I thought there was a bit of inconsistency on where they were meant to be from. But there was definitely some bad dialogue. There was some like clunky metaphor style dialogues way to this like super religious family, and
Yeah.
they're sort of talking about things like a thorn in a flower or something.
That's
It
right.
can't be like,
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact line, but it's something like that, and that's pretty sort of cheesy. And then there's a line at one point from Mary to her brother, and it's sort of after he's kind of told what they're doing, and she sort of says, I seem to recall curiosity put a
Yes.
splinter in your foot. Yeah.
Splinter in your foot.
I,
Yes.
yeah. So a line like that I thought was pretty bad as well. So there's a few clunky lines like that sort of take you out of it. So I sort of wonder also if maybe this is the sort of subject matter where it just feels a bit dated now. Unless you do something really interesting with it, or if you just make it like a really good sort of, as you said, slow burn psychological horror. It just feels like these sorts of characters have been used so much in horror.
Even like a scary film. Like I wasn't expecting, big scares or big slasher type scares or anything like that, obviously. But like I was expecting some sort of horror, psychological horror or supernatural horror, or maybe some really nice atmospheric tracking shots, or just anything. But like there were no scares in this movie. Like I said, I did find some of the punishments a little bit hard to watch, but even those were very tame. I mean, not that I wanted to see, anyone tortured or stuff, but given the subject matter and the time, I was expecting like more insane punishments. I was expecting more intensity. And I think at some point I was like, are they trying to imply that the girls aren't in love and that they've misconstrued it somehow? Because like at the beginning there was about 10 minutes or so where you weren't sure what was going on with the girls, but then it was confirmed that they were in love. And then they never quite explained, like we never really got to see the start of their love story, or like how everything kind of came to be. And even though I thought the two actresses were fine acting wise, I didn't feel like they had a big enough chemistry for me to believe that these two girls are so in love with each other that they would risk being damned. And then there was a part kind of towards the middle that I started to get very confused about, where the grandmother finds them in like the chicken shed because they've made a deal with like one of the farm hands to let them go into the chicken shed at night in return for like food. And the grandmother comes and finds them. Yeah, and then she does this weird thing where she like makes the Isabel Furman character like float. She looks like she's in The Exorcist or something, and then she like pinches her throat and takes her voice away. And I'm like, okay, why are we worried about lesbians when the grandmother is clearly some sort of devil worshipper? Like that didn't make any sense to me. The fact that the grandmother has supernatural powers, but we're still like talking about homosexuality being a sin when like the grandmother is out there like literally floating people and taking their voices away. Like, shouldn't we be worried about the fact that the grandmother is some kind of witch? It just, I don't know, it didn't make much sense to me. What about you? Did you find that bit a bit weird? I found it a bit weird.
That's true. It felt weird, and it felt a bit out of place with the film, because like the look, and it didn't look very good. I think you could
No.
tell this is quite a cheap, streaming type film.
Uh-huh.
So it was a bit funny. It's sort of the sort of scene you see in like The Exorcism of Emily Rose or that
Mm.
kind of film, more of. And so it obviously it might, if it looked better, that would be one thing. But yeah, it felt out of place in this film, and it just
Mm.
felt sort of shoved in. Like we didn't really need it. Like we already had a storyline, and they just needed to run with it. Luckily, there wasn't too many of those
No,
sorts of
no.
scenes. But then it was just a bit weird. Then it felt like that scene was from a different movie a little bit.
Mm. And then, like, at the end of the movie, it's implied that, like, whatever power the grandmother had is now, like, been passed on to Mary. And it's like, so she's gone from, like, being
Mm.
persecuted for being homosexual to now she's going to get persecuted because she's got, like, supernatural powers. And I don't know. It was a weird movie. Like, I feel like they didn't quite know what story they wanted to tell. It almost felt like they were working from a script that was in, like, its first or second draft, not its final stages. And I didn't find anything particularly groundbreaking, or not even groundbreaking, just anything particularly dynamic about this. It was just very, very blah. And like you said, if you're going to do this kind of
Yeah.
story, this kind of like puritanical, coming down on homosexuality, then you need to at least either, like you said, either make it a parody or do something really interesting with it. And I'm going to use like the Fear Street example. Like that was done really well because it exposed the curse on the town and it gave you the truth about Sarah Fear, and it came with all these reveals that worked for the whole trilogy. So when you saw that play out in Fear Street, it made sense and it was like really good. And even though that movie was like really cheesy and all the Irish accents are terrible, it's definitely more dynamic than this movie, which, like I said, was just a little bit boring. Rory Culkin's character was interesting. Like I thought that I thought he played him very well, very effectively creepy and unsettling. But again, it was like he just kind of randomly turned up like 2/3 of the way through the
Mm.
film. Like we've never seen this character before. I remember watching the film and thinking to myself, isn't Rory Culkin supposed to be in this? Where is he? And then he just kind of pops up in the third act, and it's just like a really random thing. We have some sexual assault, which was not fantastic. Like that was totally not needed. The scene where he attacks Isabel Furman's character,
Mm.
and it was
Yeah.
just really weird. Like I know some of these Shudder originals, obviously they're low budget films that are pushed into production for the screening service, but there have been some good films that have come out of Shudder originals that have been really good. So I don't think that's like so much an excuse to say, oh, well, it's just a streaming service film, because some of the stuff they've produced has been really good. I think this one was a bit of a miss. I think it's going for that kind of, elevated horror that's very popular right now, going more for like the psychological horror and trying to get into like some issues, but it just felt really thin to me, very shallow, like it didn't really go beneath the surface.
The Intruder, the Culkin. I thought it was a bit cheesy just because he had the sack on his head, and that was a bit silly. That's kind of a cliche you see in these sorts of films set in this sort of time period, and that he obviously had the mark on his face, but yeah, once he got into his character, and it was actually one of the more edgy scenes, and he was effective. But I agree with you. Then he felt just his placement, felt a bit random. Like maybe you could have introduced him earlier in the film and gave him a bit longer, sort of thing. But yeah, he was definitely one of the better points of the film. They're definitely branching out and expanding, because when I first signed up to them, which I think was a couple of years ago, it was a while back anyway, they didn't really have that much, but they've definitely grown not only their catalogue but also their originals, and obviously gone into TV. They've done some pretty good documentaries, so they've definitely branched out, Shudder, as a service. So I think it's become a lot more varied, and you got some intriguing older cult movies I've seen pop up there that I thought, okay, yeah, I've never even heard of this one, so I'll put that on my list to check out. Suggested this, and like you said, I just saw the premise and I thought, okay, yeah, that could be something. I think with that premise, solid cast as well. So I thought, yeah, this could could be something, but nah, sort of wasted it really. I didn't.
Yeah.
Very, very little here for me, and
Mm,
obviously for you by the sounds of it.
yeah.
So I think we're pretty much done. I don't think there's a great deal to say about this one.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is not one of the ones that we can really sink our teeth into, but it's nice every so often to just have a look at something new, see if it takes your fancy. I don't think it was a terrible movie by any means. Like, I wouldn't go out saying, oh my God, it's
Hmm.
so bad, it's horrible. It was just very blah, there was really nothing that
Yeah,
stood out.
I wouldn't say terrible, but
Mm.
yeah. But I think, as we've said before, sometimes with the terrible ones, you've got a bit more to talk about,
Yeah.
maybe. But
Just go with 5 out of 10. Very middle of
okay.
the road, straight down the middle. Not terrible. I probably wouldn't watch it again, but I think it was saved a little by some of the acting was quite strong. I did think some of the cinematography was effective, and the premise at least was interesting, even if they didn't really do much with it. So I'd probably go with a 5, just very, very average. What about you?
Okay. Well, I'm close. I'm a bit lower. I'm going to go 4.5.
Fair enough.
It's sort of in that realm. Yeah, it didn't do a lot for me. And I think because I did find it quite boring, that's maybe what drags it down,
Yeah.
a little bit lower than you. But overall, I'm in the same ballpark. I think I sort of agree that it's not like a really bad film. It's
Mm.
just
Just
very
kind of there.
mediocre.
Yeah.
And definitely feels like a missed opportunity. Last thing Mary saw, that's our thoughts on it. As I said, we'll do more of these as we go along, like bonus episodes, things like that. If you want to suggest a streaming movie, a Shudder movie, whatever, then do so in the comments below. If you've seen this film, then let us know your thoughts also in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. Share us out on social media. And you can also support me at Patreon at patreon.com/boardnow, where you can get some extras, including some like movie commentaries and also some like I do X-Files commentaries on there. So at the moment, so look out for some of that stuff. Rachel, do you want to promote anything?
Oh, sure. Just follow me, Rachel McDonald, just video essays covering TV shows and movies. And you can also find my Twitter and my Tumblr through my YouTube channel. And so, yeah, just follow me everywhere if you want lots and lots of fandom content, because I'm basically just a big geek and love talking about movies and TV shows. So come follow me everywhere.
Guys, and we'll be back with more horror reviews soon. See you guys later. Goodbye.